Hello and welcome to the Pages to Pixels podcast, where we talk about new movies every week. I'm Rohan.
I'm Keerthana.
And today we're talking about Beetlejuice, don't say it a third time. But essentially it's a sequel to the other movie that has only one time in this title. And the IMDb logline is, after a family tragedy, 3 generations of Dietz family return home to Winter River. Still haunted by titular character, Lydia's life is turned upside down when her teenage daughter Astrid accidentally opens the portal to the afterlife. So what do you think of this movie?
I appreciate the effort you're going through.
I almost looked up while reading the logline. So what did you think of this movie?
Surprisingly, I really enjoyed it. I mean, despite your text early on saying that I would hate it, I can see why you would say that. It's got its quirks for sure, but no, I mean, I quite enjoyed it actually. I watched it only last night. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised myself as well. I really did not expect to like this movie. I have seen the first one, but I remember very little about it, and I'm pretty sure when I watched it, it was put on in the background, while hanging out with other people, not really paying attention. So watching this was like watching it without having seen the first one for me. And so when I saw the trailers for this movie, I was like, this looks not good. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I actually had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I watched the first one just a couple of days ago because I'd never watched it. So I was like, if I'm going to go watch the sequel, I might as well just watch the first one. Didn't like that. Oh. The world of it is very imaginative. Yeah. And it stands out that way. It's very immersive. And I can see why there is like an appeal to that. But Beetlejuice was a bit of a pervert, and I just could not see past that.
Yeah. That's fair.
Also, Alec Baldwin was so young and so handsome in that. He looked familiar and I couldn't tell who he was. And I Googled it and I was just like, what the hell? So that was an interesting discovery. I like the second one significantly more than the first one.
Okay. Yeah. So I actually considered watching or rewatching the first one. And then when you said when you said you were going to rewatch it, I decided not to rewatch it because I wanted to see how well does it stand without context of the first one.
Right.
And for me, I think it was pretty good. Even not seeing the first one, I was able to follow at least the story of this movie completely, and I think that's necessary for. I mean, there is a debate on like, hey, should films stand alone completely, or should they? Sometimes, with franchises, you need to have it. For example, if you're watching Harry Potter: Deathly Hallows Part 2 without having seen any of the other ones. It may not make sense. And I agree, like, you should watch all of them for that franchise, and I don't think each movie has standalone. But for this, I feel like it should stand alone because the first one came out in the 80s. Yeah. So if we're getting the sequel in 2024, a good chunk of your audience is not going to have seen the first one.
True. I will say that I think in an earlier episode I said, Hollywood is just tapping into existing IP and they're never going to like come up with new ideas, and it's really sad. But I see the appeal for doing something like this, and
I mean, $110 million.
Yeah, and weekend. Wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, if they did Goonies 2, I would watch that. I see why it works.
Yeah.
I enjoy it as an audience member, maybe not as much as a writer, but I think a lot of things about this film worked for me. I really want to shout out Catherine O'Hara because she was great.
Her death scene was
solid. It was so good. Also, you've watched Schitt's Creek, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that Moira Rose was like heavily based on her character in the first one.
Potentially. I mean, it is the same actress, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same eccentricities. It's the same
Yeah, so I think
they also used footage, I think, from Schitt's Creek because it's the crow stuff. She's really? Doing her little interactive whatever. I think.
I don't remember much of Schitt's Creek. I only watched a little bit. I wasn't really a fan.
It's like The Office where you gotta give it some time. It's good. I love it. It's one of my favorites.
I really enjoyed the style of it, and I know Tim Burton has a very distinct style.
Came through for sure.
Sometimes it works. sometimes it doesn't. Lately, in my opinion, it hasn't really been working. This time it did for me.
I found it very, very immersive, basically, because of all the world building and stylistic choices they've made, and it remained consistent throughout. It felt like a very cohesive unit. I also thought that the actors were really good, and Winona Ryder especially, like, she stood out. It was great watching her again.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me the one who really did stood out was Michael Keaton.
Right.
He was just so great. I don't know. Some of it might have been improv. It feels like a lot of it was improv because there's so much throwing at you. It doesn't matter. He was consistently great throughout, and I don't think he had a ton of screen time in this one either.
Not even in the between the two of them, like I think he has the least screen time among all the characters.
But every second that he's on screen, he's super charismatic and super funny.
Who would you say is the protagonist in this film?
See, that is actually we can start talking about issues, because I think the biggest issue that I had with this movie was, in terms of the story, it was a little convoluted, but at the same time, I feel like it didn't matter much. There was so much that I feel like just kind of, it's just stuff happening.
Yeah.
I think Monica Bellucci's character is, she was great. I loved her presence. You take her out of the movie, nothing really changes.
Yeah.
Same with Willem Dafoe. He's great. He's super funny. You take him out, and he doesn't have any impact on the story.
Yeah. I agree. That was one of the things I was going to bring up as well. It read more like a TV show. We were just jumping from one storyline to another storyline and another storyline. I found it difficult to figure it out. In terms of the protagonist, it was interesting because if you look at it, if you break it down theoretically, right? Who has the goal of the film that has an obstacle in it?
It's kind of, you can kind of argue Jenna Ortega or Winona Ryder,
right? But see, if we look at it like that, I think Beetlejuice is the protagonist.
Okay.
Because his goal is to meet Winona Ryder and get married to her, and all the obstacles get thrown his way. But what is Jenna Ortega's goal?
Yeah, her goal is to have a normal life and then potentially find her father.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I guess you can say that.
Yeah. Winona Ryder's goal is probably, I would say it's to connect with Jenna Ortega.
Yeah. I mean, it was a little up in the air. Inciting incident was them, would you say going to the house or the death of the father?
I would say probably the death of the grandfather, because that's why they go to the house.
I guess it happens to them. Interesting structure, for sure.
You were asking who the protagonist is. I mean, you can ask the same question about who is the antagonist, because you think it's going to be Monica Bellucci.
But it's really...
and then her stuff gets wrapped up very quickly and easily. Even same with the kid, whatever his name was.
I would say the antagonist is whoever decided on the set design of that weird gold shit around Danny DeVito's mouth. That I could not watch. It was so bad. It was bad. I hated it.
I didn't mind it.
So it sounds like there's a lot of confusion over if this film has a protagonist or an antagonist. Because multiple characters have different journeys, but also are presented as different obstacles for another.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not necessarily opposed to having a structure like that. I just think that in this movie, I feel like the story was secondary, and it was just, this is very much a vibes movie.
Definitely.
Where you go to it for, the production design, the world, the humor. And if you like all this stuff and it works for you, then you have a good time.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then and you want story, then you're probably not going to enjoy this movie.
No, I mean, I see exactly what you mean. So I don't like horror. So weirdly enough, it kind of worked for me that the story was so light and kind of barely there.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't much to scare me. But I will say the one thing that didn't work for me was the weird CGI sandworms. I preferred the shitty
Dune. You didn't like the Dune reference?
No, well, I just like I just preferred the shitty like sock puppet version of it because in my head like that's a sandworm. In this they like smoothened it out or whatever, and I was like, that's not a sandworm. No, I mean otherwise it was a cool, fun watch. But the baby was so gross.
Yeah.
Oh god, it was gross. It was. I hated that, and then it was biting her leg. Yeah.
Yeah, the dream sequence.
What did you make of Jenna Ortega in this film?
I'm gonna be honest. I like Jenna Ortega. I wasn't a big fan of her in this movie, and I'm not necessarily blaming her.
Right.
But her character just feels like it didn't belong. Her character wanted to be in a serious drama.
I agree. I also think that she was written as an obstacle for Winona Ryder. She was like a plot point.
Yeah.
I thought for Winona Ryder because it's like she did what she was supposed to do in the film. Her stories, the point of her story was her mother needed a goal.
Yeah.
But I thought there were not that many layers to her character. Yeah.
Someone who I really did like in this movie though was Justin Theroux.
Yeah.
He was hilarious. And I think a lot of it was his performance.
Yeah.
One thing that didn't work for me was a little bit of his characterization, because they reveal at the end that he doesn't care about Lydia, and he is really just in it for the money. But when watching the whole movie, it really did seem like he did care for her. And like, I mean, you could say that, okay, maybe he cares to like a weird degree.
Yeah.
But it really didn't seem like all he cared about was the money.
Yeah, it definitely didn't come across that way. I think the only time I clocked it was when he let her take the meds when he knew it wasn't good for her, I guess. When like she shouldn't have been. That was the only time where I was like, this is a little weird. But I
also
think
he was the one who threw the rest of the
True, yes.
Or even when he has the boxes and he hears a scream, he starts sprinting out of concern. I think if all he cared about was money,
he would be sprinting the other way.
Yeah, I don't think he would have cared. So
no, I agree. I think that was a little bit. I don't know. Maybe more like little clues would have helped if they were just sprinkled throughout. The one place I did think that they did the clues really well was with the ghost boyfriend. Yeah. I thought that was a really smart move.
Yeah.
Is there anything specific writing-wise that you think applies to this film more than others that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think like I said earlier on, this film definitely like indulges in itself and its world. And I've noticed that like writing can be really it can be really enjoyable when you allow yourself to sort of indulge in the space you've created. But when I was writing a short that we'll talk about in some time, I think that's the first time in my life that I've done that. Where as I was writing, I just kind of like let it go. Where I was like, okay, this is horror. Like I'm really going to like lean into that. Like I'm going to like let it kind of take over, you know? And I feel like they did that in this film. Like, okay, so we have this weird world that we've set up for ourselves. Like, let's let that world dictate some of what we're going to do here. Like, what would, like Danny DeVito's character, for example, the character design, the way, like him drinking, what was it, like cleaning liquid or something like that? Like, I just felt like it was elevated so much because the writers decided to like give in.
And are you saying it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it works. I think it's a good thing.
Okay, so in this form, because usually when people say a movie was indulgent, it's usually a bad thing. So you're kind of saying, you're kind of praising this movie.
Yes, because I think it was done skillfully. I said the same thing about Batman as well, because they knew they were making a movie and they threw in some cheesy lines and it worked most of the time. But there were a couple that kind of like went through the cracks. I think with this one, I didn't feel that. I think every element, they were like, I just think that they let the world take a little more control, and I really enjoyed that.
I agree with your point. Maybe not the Batman part, but I agree with the general gist of it.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about what I want to talk about is kind of that fun movie, because I think you had asked me in the past before. And I believe this may have been during our Deadpool discussion, is would you enjoy a movie that is not really saying something great with the story, whether socially or something else thematically, will you enjoy something that's just fun? And I think my answer was yes, but it still has to present something unique and, come from an artistic vision that doesn't feel like it is just that doesn't feel made by committee.
Right.
And for me, I think this movie kind of nails that because we just talked about this. A lot of the story stuff doesn't make sense. You can take out multiple characters and it has no bearing on the story.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I enjoy this movie because the experience of watching it was a ton of fun. And this doesn't feel like a basic mainstream studio movie where it doesn't matter who the director is.
Right.
This really feels like, this is a movie made by Tim Burton, and you have any other director, this is a very different movie.
True. I agree. I think there's a difference between like a cookie cutter movie made by a studio versus a person making a film. I also think that at the end of the day, I think intent comes across. And I've said this like multiple times before. In this, I think despite the fact that the story was a little loose or whatever, it still felt well intentioned. It didn't feel like someone was slacking off.
Yeah.
That is usually where my criticism comes from. If we're watching a film and it doesn't have a story or whatever, there's a difference between like, hey, we really tried versus like, whatever, this is all we're gonna do, right?
It's my little fun question. Of the gag deaths of different characters, which was your favorite?
I mean, I really liked the William Dafoe look.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. I also really liked the coffee secretary lady's death because she was shot, I'm assuming by him.
Probably. So, and she just has like
a little bullet mark. I thought that was like, that made me laugh.
I think one that I really liked just creatively was the dads with all the fish. I think the actor's name is Santiago Cabrera. I think just that was kind of just walk around with all these like fish attached to him at all times. So that was kind of funny.
Yeah, no, that was really cool. I mean,
no, the hot dog guy.
Sure. Yes,
the guy with all the hot dogs. That was the funniest one.
No, that was really good.
He even had like the winner on like his.
Yep. Well, I guess that's what a winner looks like then. I really like that part of their world building. It was just so unique, and I enjoyed it. Very creative.
I also loved. I don't know if he's one of the dead people, but Bob. Loved Bob.
I feel so bad.
I know.
She kept sucking his soul, and I was like, he's just Bob. Don't you see? I
know, when he died, I was like, no.
All right.
Let's move on to standout scene.
You want to go first, since you called dibs before I even watched the movie?
Yeah, no, my standout scene is Monica Bellucci's entrance,
right?
Where she and all of her body parts break out of the boxes and kind of one by one, in the tune of the music, slowly crawl over to her and assemble fully. And it's a pretty long scene. And they go, it's like just when you think it's done, it's like, oh wait, no, here's one finger or something like that. But it was just.
Has it already been established that she's Beetlejuice's wife?
I don't remember if she's in the first movie, if I'm being honest.
I was just going to add to that. It's probably a reference to the Addams Family.
Right, because of the thing. Yeah.
And also Elvira probably looks inspired from that. The Munsters.
You're right. That's what it is. My favorite scene was when Jenna Ortega finds out that she was making out with a ghost.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought it worked really well. I think one beat before the making out, he says something where he's like, oh, like I'm like this character from this film or whatever. And it's a really old film. And she's like, what are you talking about? And then they just kind of brush past it and the conversation goes on. So when I was watching it, I was like, something's up. But before I could like put anything together, they revealed it. And I thought it was really smart.
So I actually can't comment on that scene because I went to the bathroom during it. So I think I left like roughly when she arrived at his house, and then when I came back, that's when she was like, "Oh my god, you're a ghost!"
Oh my god, Rohan, you missed it. It was a good scene.
I trust you.
Shout out to Sugar Rose or Seeker Rose, the score in that scene.
Yeah,
really great.
Oof, my stomach like dropped when she was like in the air.
Oh,
it was so scary. Oh yeah, so basically what happens is they make out. And as they're making out, like she doesn't realize that they're floating. When she opens her eyes, she's like in the air.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's when she's like, "Oh my god, you're a ghost." Yeah.
Lots of male manipulators in this movie.
Oh yeah.
So many. Michael Keaton's character is meant to be an asshole.
Yeah.
He really pushed my buttons.
Mm-hmm.
It worked. I was just like, I hope he dies, and he did, and it was great.
Well, he didn't really die.
He burst into a million little pieces. You think that they're saving him for a third one?
Yeah. Well, that's why I think say his name 3 times in the third one.
They're not going to do that. They can't even say it during the promotions. He definitely pushed my buttons. It was frustrating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to score.
Just as a reminder, the way we do our scores is on the script coverage scale of pass, consider, and recommend. Basically what that means is pass is we don't think it's a great movie, consider is we think it's pretty decent, and recommend is when we legitimately think it is a great movie. As a reminder, this is just a score. It's not an actual recommendation. How would you score Beetlejuice?
I would say it's a strong consider.
Okay.
The only reason I'm pulling away from a recommend is because of the disjointed storylines.
Yeah.
I can see how it might take people out of the viewing experience.
No, that's very fair. I'm gonna give it a weak recommend.
Right.
Kind of similar reason. I think the storyline could be better, and I kind of did say it didn't matter to me all that much because this is more a vibes movie, and I enjoyed watching it. That said, it is kind of like you take out 2 characters who had a ton of screen time, and the movie stays the same. It's a little bit like you can do a little bit better. That's what I'm saying. But I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. What would you recommend to someone who likes this movie?
I would recommend. So I think this movie is it's a comedy, but with the skin of a horror movie. So I want to recommend that, another horror comedy, which is What We Do in the Shadows.
That's a great recommendation.
Both the movie and the TV show.
Yeah.
They're both super funny. If you don't know what it is, it's basically imagine Parks and Rec or The Office, but everyone is a vampire.
And they're 20 times more sleazy and
oh yeah.
It's a great show. I love that show. I'm going to recommend Coraline. It is an animated feature, and it borders between horror, fantasy, thriller, and it's in that space.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
It's really cool. I didn't watch it. I actually watched it for the first time last year. I know it's a pretty old movie, but one of my friends put it on, and I watched it because he told me to, and it was great.
Yeah.
What else have you been watching?
So I watched Mother, not the Darren Aronofsky one, but actually the Bong Joon-ho one, where it follows a caring mom who whose son is she has a son who is mentally challenged and is accused of killing a girl. And she is then setting out on, because the police will not investigate further,
right.
She is doing her own investigation. And most of the movie I was like, okay, this is pretty good, but nothing really stood out. And then the last 30 minutes or so are just incredible. But yeah, really, really great watch.
This week I watched Goat. Goat is the greatest of all time. Everybody should watch it. It's the opposite of the energy and tone and everything that I'm assuming Mother was. This is a mindless entertainer, and it is amazing. Everybody should watch it. With that, we come to the end of this week's episode of the Pages to Pixels podcast. I'm Keerthana.
I'm Rohan.
And we'll see you again next week with a brand new episode. Thank you.
Thank you.